That's Fiona.
Chairman, the meeting is live.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. As chairman of the Children's, Young People and Families Portfolio Evidence Gathering session, I want to thank you, all of you, for agreeing to participate in this scrutiny. The IP budget scrutiny is the most high-profile scrutiny event of the year, when the executive is held to account on behalf of our residents. This session, to confirm, is being webcast. We'll be asking questions of the officers and executive member following our key line of inquiries. Please relax. I confirm that we are all here to represent and ensure our residents are obtaining the best value and standard from our services. I would like to welcome all members and officers today, including our executive member, Fiona Thompson. We will shortly beginning our key line of inquiries. Before each member speaks or follows through on one of these inquiries, I'd like you all to introduce yourself because we have residents and public watching us. First of all, I'd like to ask our executive member, Fiona Thompson, to introduce and tell us about your successes this year, challenges and your risks.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you. And good morning, everybody. Good morning, colleagues. I'm Fiona Thompson. I'm the portfolio holder for Children's Services in Hertfordshire, and I thought it'd be helpful just to give a very brief introduction to this portfolio. It's the second largest portfolio after adult social care and provides a wide range of statutory services, including looked after children, care leavers, child protection, children in need, fostering and adoption, safeguarding, corporate parenting, youth justice, separated migrant children and the virtual school. And of course, those statutory services sit alongside our early help and prevention, our family first support, which include our early years service, our intensive family support services, services for young people, family centres and our specialist adolescent services. Supporting children with special educational needs and disabilities is another large service area within Children's Services. However, that will be covered with Councillor Douris in his IP session. Just to give you some scale of the work carried out by Children's Services teams, Hertfordshire has around 275,000 children under the age of 18, and Children's Services teams provide support to thousands of children every year through its statutory services and through its early help and prevention service. For example, last year, 3,600 children, families rather, were helped through targeted family support interventions. And our early family help teams have supported over 16,000 families during the last 6 years. And that is in addition to children in care and care leavers. We support children with a child protection plan. Within the corporate plan, our priority is for every child to have the best start in life. And within Children's Services, the child is at the heart of everything we do. We want our children to be happy and loved and to thrive in their family and community. Our way forward is Hertfordshire's Plan for Children and Young People, which sets out how we aim to improve outcomes for children, young people and families, and to get back on track following the pandemic. And three main priorities are working in partnership to deliver early help and support to children, young people and their families, to build life chances, to meet the needs of Hertfordshire's children within their local community, and to have a skilled and flexible workforce who are proud to work for Hertfordshire. We consistently benchmark well nationally against statistical neighbours, and Chair, you asked about our successes. Well, the number of children in care is half the national average, under 1,000, and we have the second lowest rate of children in the country with a child protection plan. And that's really good news for our children. We benchmark well across our nationally and statistical neighbours, and we provide consistently good early help and social work interventions supported by the Families First and family safeguarding models. We have low levels of repeat referrals into social care. We have good levels of school attendance and attainment for children in care. We provide placement stability for children in care, and have strong multi-agency working with our statutory partners, police and health, through our Safeguarding Children's Partnership. And we have a very well established and robust quality assurance framework. Our challenges and risks: we are seeing increased demand for services, and that's a legacy impact of COVID. And we're seeing increased complexity of need and levels of hardship, and increased demand for social care. Referral rates increased by 25% in the first 6 months of 22-23, but that's still low compared with national figures. And more than 80% of children under 5 who are known to children's services or at risk of in need are registered with one of our family services. Placement sufficiency is another area where we're facing challenges, and I'm sure we'll be discussing that in more detail as we go through the questioning. And recruitment and retention of staff is a national issue. But just to say, really, that the child is at the heart of everything we do. That is our focus, and it's about the experiences of our young people. So thank you. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Fiona, and thank you so much for your time as well today. I know the pressures that you are all under this particular week, and understood, absolutely understood. Now we're going to move on. We're going to take this one on, and we're going to start our key line of inquiry questions to members. And Councillor Marius Artemi is going to ask the first of several inquiry lines that we've made. Thank you, Marius.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I am Councillor Marius Artemi. I represent my community in Welwyn Garden City South. So I have the privilege of starting the scrutiny of today, I think, with the first question. So within the IP under contingency in section 4.17, it discusses and highlights certain significant risks and levels of uncertainty to the budget, and this comes from obviously looking at the 22-23 budget, which has been exhausted in several months of this already. So it speaks of a contingency of around £10 million for 23-24. And my question is regarding this: that what assurances can you place on this? What assurances can the Directorate place on this, so that we don't have an undue burden placed on our general contingency for the future years, including 23, 24 and onwards?
Yeah, thank you for your question, Councillor Artemi. I mean, as you've outlined, we've seen, and as I've outlined, we've seen increased demand for services, and you reference 417 and the contingency of 10 million. I think across the council, the general budget, there is the general use of reserves would be considered. However, if we continue to see increased risk or financial pressures, then during the year we would look for savings. But of course, we would need to look at those within the context of the services that we deliver, and it would have to be across a council-wide approach. And so perhaps I might bring Joe Fisher in here, my Executive Director for Children's Services, who may be able to add a little bit more detail to that. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Fiona. Actually, Rachel Adler's on the call, who's my Director for Finance. So, Fiona, I've actually asked Rachel to respond first. Go ahead, Rachel.
No problem. Thanks, Joe. Morning, everyone. As Joe mentioned, I'm Rachel Adler. I'm Director for Finance and Business Support for Children's. I was just going to give a little bit more context around the contingency and the use in 22-23, and then answer the question around how we would then consider that for as you mentioned, not exhausting it in 23-24. So, as you know, it's 10 million contingency has been factored into the budget for 23-24, and that's detailed in Part A of the IP, as you mentioned. It sits in resources, so they look at what's, I suppose, affordable within the budget, but also what's a reasonable amount given the increase in risk, which also you referenced. In page 39 on Part A, it shows you quite how quickly the situation escalated in 22-23, as you know. And I suppose I would just mention at that point there was a lot of world events which then led into increased inflation, which caused a lot of that escalation of the pressures. So very hard to foresee that. So when we were setting the budget, it was approved back in February, we couldn't have necessarily predicted quite how the inflation was going, and I suppose that's led to the escalating overspends, as noted on page 39. It notes further in the IP, I suppose, the process, and in order to, I suppose, give comfort over to what we would do if the same situation was to happen again, It talks in part A about the process that the council went through, I suppose, for this portfolio, but for all services in the portfolio, and then strong financial governance of the council in terms of our monthly monitoring of budgets, reporting that into senior management board, and then through into to members of that situation. And I suppose I just perhaps bring reference back to that of the strong financial management of the council, and that was noted in the peer review as well. So I suppose if we were to be in a situation where we saw pressures and costs rising quickly, we would look to follow the same process as we did this year in order to look to manage that and to seek activities how we could balance the budget. And the last thing I would just mention as well, just in terms of that contingency, I was just going to flag the process that would be gone through internally about if pressures were to rise quite quickly and were to be under financial pressures. The expectation is to obviously review and challenge those pressures, look to how they could be covered, but not look to put any request to use that contingency through S&B until the second half of the year. So I suppose in order to give comfort, I would point to our strong financial management and the processes we went through in 22-23 in order to look to balance the budget with those pressures, but then also the process for using that contingency in that nothing would be looked to go against that until the second half of the year. So I hope that gives some comfort as to how we would not put undue burden on that contingency if situations were to arise in 23-24 and pressures were to come in.
So can I just ask just a follow up from what you've said then, and Rachel,
Please,
specifically, I guess from what you've asked. So just to double check something here then, for my understanding for everybody else's then. So what you're saying is that particularly for 23-24, then approximately halfway through the year, you'd assess the situation again, and you would have some plan to mitigate any potential materialisation of these risks, I guess.
Yeah, and it notes we review obviously the position every month, so the monthly monitoring happens as a matter of course. But yeah, you're right. We would look to directors to, if there were quick pressures, to how would they mitigate those before then anything would come back in more centrally to look for contingency in the second half. Okay. But yeah, we have regular monthly monitoring anyway, so it's constantly under review the situation. And
the last question I've got is the regular monthly monitoring. Are they lagging indicators? Because I'm assuming they're lagging indicators, aren't they? It's already happened.
The monthly monitoring looks to project what we expect the full year to be. So it's you're right, obviously the month has happened, but the monitoring is always looking at what does that mean for the full year. So we're always looking at what's our projected year-end position at that stage. But obviously we'll know some with certainty because it's happened, but the rest is projection. So it's a balance. So we're always looking at what do we think the year end is going to be, and what activity do we need to do if there's challenges coming through.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Maris. Any further questioning before we right, going to move across, follow through on this, and Councillor Nigel Bell will be picking up on this one.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Councillor Nigel Bell. I'm the Labour spokesman on Children's Services. And yes, obviously, I hope everything goes well and wish all staff well on the inspection. Can I just, obviously, my question, I don't know if you want me to read it out. I've got a question here. With children entering care presenting increasingly complex issues in emotional and mental health needs, as well as increasing support for education, health and care plans, how does the Directorate plan to ensure that cost of higher levels of complexity does not become unmanageable? Now, obviously, I welcome and I note out of the extra 14 million, the 6.5 million included in the plan to ensure there's sufficient funding to support this increase in numbers and complexity of children looked after. And obviously, throughout the year, Joe and other officers have obviously explained, and we've seen in figures and reports that extra complexity of children, especially I think it's 10 to 14-year-olds. So I'm just wondering, sort of initially, if Joe and other officers can say how we are managing that, and if that 6.5 million and other monies is going to be enough, and what other plans are there to make sure we can cope.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Fiona, are you happy for me to?
Yes, if you're happy to kick off. Thank you, Joe.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jo Fisher. I'm the Executive Director for Children's Services. So thank you very much. A really good question. As Fiona has already set out, we are seeing not just an increasing number of children and young people needing our help over the past few years, but also that escalation in terms of need, Councillor Bell. And there's a couple of things I would say in terms of what are we doing, or what can we do to make sure that we, continue to meet need as early as possible, and in doing so, bear down on costs. Firstly, and Fiona's already mentioned, we do really well when we compare ourselves with other local authorities. So we already have relatively low numbers of children who are in our care or in our statutory social work services, including child protection. And our family safeguarding and our families first approach support consistently good early help and safeguarding interventions which de-escalate risk and need, and make sure that children and young people are getting their needs met in the right place at the right time. Our family safeguarding approach has been rolled out nationally to over 20 local authorities, as you know. We got it independently reviewed in 2020, and that showed a more than 40% decrease in numbers of children on child protection plans and a more than 30% decrease on children looked after, and we continue to see that play out. So part of what we need to do, Councillor Bell, is continue to innovate and push on our family safeguarding approach, because I believe that's a big part of the picture on how we make sure we're meeting the complex needs early on. And of course, early help and early prevention is key to this too. Our families first approach, which provides sort of a tiered or graduated response to need, both those with really emerging needs, families with emerging needs, but also families with quite complex and multiple needs that need a really targeted response. Families who are in that space needing a targeted early help support, we have huge success rate. We've worked with over 16,000 families in the past 7 years through our families first approach, and those needing the really targeted response, only a small number of those progress on into statutory social work services. The vast majority of them are supported to have their needs met in their homes and in their local communities. So again, I think we really need to push on the early help space. You in your question, you touched on mental health, and I think quite rightly we're all concerned around across the country the escalating sort of mental health needs and emotional well-being needs that we're seeing for our children, and indeed that we're seeing that in Hertfordshire too. In the last 12 months, we've invested an additional 1.3 million really into strengthening early help around children and young people's emotional well-being and mental health. And we continue to roll out our mental health support teams across schools in Hertfordshire, including special schools. And we're on track for having 40% coverage of all of our schools by April 2024. But some other stuff that we're doing in that space. We implemented our Coming Back Stronger programme during the pandemic, and we've continued since the pandemic, which is all about making sure that we support children and young people to get their lives and their education back on track. And that's included a real well-being support into our schools. We've trained over 900 mental health leads across our schools and all educational settings in Hertfordshire, and established an emotional well-being team to work across the education system. So there's a lot happening in the school space. We've also initiated an early help support service for families who are concerned about eating disorders. We know that nationally the numbers of children and young people presenting with eating disorders has increased. And indeed it has in Hertfordshire, and that really is about making sure that we've trained professionals to support children and young people with emerging eating disorders, but also making sure that parents can reach out and get that early support themselves. And we've got web-based online support for parent and carers across a range of mental health and emotional wellbeing services where they can get the help they need early on. So there's a lot happening in terms of early help, particularly around the more complex needs. And lastly, and I can see a hand's gone up, so I will stop. But lastly, and it does kind of cross into another question, so I won't dwell on this. But in terms of residential, children who need residential or foster care placements, a huge amount of work happening in that space to make sure that we've got the right provision in Hertfordshire.
Okay, sorry, Chair, can I come back?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Please come back.
Yeah, thanks, Joe, and for your very comprehensive reply. And obviously, I've always supported, and we will do, I'm sure, the safeguarding and the everything you've done, and the early help, very important. But as you say, the high cost, for example, of some of those children that have to have special packages, it's gone up. I mean, that 10 to 15,000 a week, some of them, and some of them even more. We know certain have been highlighted in the media, etc. And that we've had to send way beyond the county, and I know partly of the trying to look at ways of keeping as many children within or as near the county as possible. But for those who who do cost at least 10 to 15,000 or more, and who haven't been able, despite all the extra work you've done on the safeguarding, what plans can we do there? I know you've worked with other authorities, you've lobbied government, you're trying to get the administration to lobby government for this extra, but what else could we do there? Because do we still have, from a finance point of view, in that 6.5 million, that's to cover this extra thing? But again, you may have money, but it's what we do when we still can't get those extra plate, when we've got the really complex cases and children, and the cost is getting exorbitant. What other avenues could we go down?
So I think
Can I come in on that first? And then thank you. And you're absolutely right, Nigel. And we are seeing children presenting with increased complexity of need, and clearly they need to be cared for in the right environment that's safe for them. But of course, we have a strong residential strategy, and part of that is to create our own in-house placements and care placements, because we know that it's better for children if they can be cared for close to home. Unless there's a reason why they shouldn't be, and within in-house is going to be more cost effective, not least better for the children. And so we're working hard on that. We've opened an additional 10 places, and we're on track to open a further, I think it's in total 31. And that's really, really exciting, because actually that's about ensuring that we're caring for our children locally in-house, and we'll have a significant reduction on the budget. And we also have our residential care worker academy, which, because staffing recruitment is another issue, and I mean that's a national problem, not just specific to Hertfordshire, but we are looking to train our own residential care workers, and we have one cohort going through and another cohort are registering at the moment. So there's things that we can do, and of course we have a home opening in conjunction with health later in the year, and that will be that's jointly funded, and of course that will help to provide care for the children with more complex needs. So there's a lot that we're doing, and of course that will help to bring down costs. And then at the other end, if we can keep children out of care through our early help and intervention, then that's an additional. So it's a multi-pronged approach, I think it's fair to say. Joe, do you want to come in on anything else?
I think you pretty much said it all, actually, Fiona. So thank you. I mean, I do think, Councillor Bell, you're making a really good point. It's a point that was made through the National Review of Social Care, and we're currently waiting this month for the recommendations from government on that. But essentially what that review set out is that we need to reset the marketplace, because at the moment demand is outstripping supply, and that is driving the kind of high costs that you talked about. And locally, what we're doing is really trying to reset the local market, both through the residential strategy that Fiona just talked about, and also through our foster care strategy, which is really ambitious in Hertfordshire. And we've got some really ambitious targets around how we really drive up not just the number of foster carers in Hertfordshire, but those that can take on children who have perhaps more complex needs and challenging needs, and making sure that we've got the right support around those placements too.
Okay, thank you. So you're confident, and I presume Fiona's confident, that the cost of the higher level, well, to ensure the cost of higher levels of complexity does not become unmanageable. I suppose that's my manageable.
I am confident that within Hertfordshire we have a really strong strategy to bear down on those escalating costs and to manage it. I do believe there's also something that needs to happen on a more national level, hence the National Review of Social Care. But certainly within Hertfordshire, I am confident that we've got a really good strategy in place to try and do what we can to reset that marketplace.
Thank you for now. Thank you, Fiona and Joe. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Watkin. you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stella, and thank you very much, everybody. Councillor Mark Watkin here, the opposition spokesperson, Lib Dem spokesperson for Children's Services and Education. I was just picking up on the mental health element of your answer just now, Joe and Fiona, and you mentioned, I think particularly Fiona, the partnership with the health service, and I'm just wondering, you know, how strong is that? How confident are you that together you can deliver the kind of support these children need, and you know the implications, again, the risk of it not being delivered if there's a disparity between what you're trying to do and what they can afford to do, or what their priorities are.
Yeah, no, good question. I think we're very lucky in Hertfordshire. We have very strong partnerships with police and with health in particular, and certainly through the recent creation of the ICP, we're seeing those partnerships even becoming even closer. And of course, we have our health and wellbeing board. So we're all sitting around the table. I think we've all identified that children, young people is a priority. It's the golden thread that runs through all of the strategies. So the ICP, the Health and Wellbeing Board, Hertfordshire County Council. And so there's a clear, I believe there's a shared vision that we want the best for children. And actually, over time, we will work even more closely together. I have an ambition that we will see more joint commissioning. It's something I speak to Joe a lot about. So, you know, joint commissioning and just greater collaboration, because we're stronger together. But you're absolutely right, Mark. With the level of complexity of need, it makes sense for us to work together to address the situation, because it impacts each and every one of us, each and every service.
Yeah, thank you. My only comment is, we in the sense of a slightly simpler view on the world. The health service is so sort of complex and it's got so many challenges facing it. It worries me that they may get diverted by national pressures to do things that necessarily aren't in line with what we want to achieve. So my concern is it's a risk. I think that's where I would be sitting at the moment.
No, it is a risk. However, it's something that I raise at every opportunity. So how can we work closer together? You know, the Hertfordshire Safeguarding Board, what can we do more together collaboratively? And it's about keeping it on the agenda front and centre.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Fiona. Just follow through on something you just picked up on, as this is sort of a financial scrutiny. Your ambitions are amazing. Where do you feel that the finance is going to be there to support all of this?
So we've seen,
I think your ambitions are incredible and honourable, fantastic.
Yeah, and look, we want the best for our children, so that's a given. We, as Joe and I think I've outlined, we've seen increased demand, we've seen increased complexity of need. So actually, it's how do we address that, and within the budgets that we have. And I think we've outlined a range of measures. So we have a very strong families first model. We have a strong targeted family support. So I recently, just anecdotally, I recently visited one of our family centres over a cup of tea, spoke to a mum who said a year ago she was in a situation not in a great place and her son was facing being taken into care. Now, as a result of the targeted family intervention and support that she had, you know, a year later, she's more confident. She said she's a better parent. She can manage her son's challenging behaviour. But best of all, he's not in care. So actually that is reinforcing why we're doing what we're doing, what the plan is. So, you know, budget pressures will always be there. We are seeing increased demand, but actually we know we've got very strong services to address and support families in need. And it's about early intervention and support so we can de-escalate, if you like. So then families don't need the more costly services. You know, children don't need to come into care. And, you know, that mum, I mean, she genuinely said to me, without the support, you know, you've changed my life and you've changed my son's future. Now, he was 8, and that's really powerful, I think, and that reinforces the importance of early intervention and prevention, which is a lower cost service to provide.
Absolutely, absolutely. We
ideal.
just want to ensure that you have that support. And as Mark picked up on earlier, we don't want to see it going across to the health service. So it's ensuring you have that continued support. Thank you so much for your answer. Any further questions around this topic? This to pick up on. I know we could probably talk about this one all day, but we're going to move to our next key line of inquiry. Councillor Sarah Tallon is going to be taking this one on. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Sarah Tallon, member for London Crony. My question is, the average cost of placements for looked after children has increased by over 50% since 2017, due in part to a lack of sufficient and secure accommodation and the profile of placements shifting towards higher cost placements, with bespoke placements costing between £10,000 to £15,000 a week. How is Hertfordshire planning to address the medium to long-term issues of falling numbers of in-house foster carers and higher cost placements?
Oh. Thank you, Sarah. And I mean, I think we've probably covered some of this in our early answers. And I think that's the thing with within children's services. Everything interlinks, and so actually it's not just about having one answer to address a challenge, because actually it's a multifaceted approach that's needed. So we have our residential strategy. We're looking to create more in-house and in-county placements for children, because we believe that's the best place for them to be, and additionally there will be budget savings associated with that, because it's cheaper, as you've outlined. Independent placements can be incredibly expensive, but ultimately it's better for children to be cared for locally. And then we have our fostering strategy as well, which we are looking to increase the number of foster carers, and as Joe has outlined, to attract foster carers who can support children with perhaps more complex needs. But we're looking at it through a varied lens, because actually we are looking for foster carers who can provide support just at weekends or emergencies or holiday cover or for teenagers. So there's a range of measures in place, and we have a very strong foster care cohort. I mean, and we have our wonderful Mockingbird Hub foster carers who support other foster carers, and that's peer-to-peer support, and that's been incredibly successful. And we're hearing from the foster carers they really like that model, and of course the children benefit from it as well. And we know that foster care and in-house foster care again is cheaper, more cost efficient than independent, and we believe it's better for children. So we are investing in our foster care strategy, in our residential strategy, to meet both of those needs. Joe, did you want to add anything?
Yes, sorry, I just was trying to raise my hand and now I'll try and put it down. Thank you, Fiona. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to add a little bit of detail, but really I think you've answered the question. So it's Councillor Tallon, I think it's a really good question. It's certainly something that occupies a lot of my time, and it's a big area of focus within our children's service strategy. Our residential strategy, I mean, we were one of the first local authorities, I think, to really push forward on how do we create within our own county sufficient, not just sufficient places for the children and young people who need them, but who are in our care, but also the right kind of profile of places, because within that cohort, as you said, we've seen that increasing level of need. So for example, we've created most of our children's homes are very small. They're 1-2 solo beds or 3-bedded homes, where we can really provide that level of intensive personalised support for the children with the most complex needs. In terms of our foster care strategy, we have in the past few years significantly increased the number of foster carers in previous years. So in 2021, we recruited an additional 53 foster carers, and in 21-22, an additional 41. This last year, our focus has really been on driving up what we refer to as the occupancy rate of our in-house foster carers. So within that, there were a number of foster carers who might be, for example, registered to take 2 children but have only got 1 child or no children, and we've driven up that occupancy rate through supporting our foster carers by 92%, which means that our use of independent foster care agencies, which are often outside of Hertfordshire, has gone down by 13%. That equates to 88 children coming into our own, additionally coming into our own cohort, our own family of foster carers. And around that, we've got really strong support structures. We want children to be in our own foster care homes because we know we give them the right level of support. We've got our Mockingbird support, which is really about buddying for foster carers by more experienced foster carers and providing that sort of support for them, and also creating links with other carers. So if a child needs a break from one particular foster carer, they can go and have some time with another foster carer. So we've got that in the way that an extended family would provide that support. We've done that with our family of foster carers. So there's a lot of work going on in that space. And this week I've had the privilege of receiving, hearing the views of foster carers. And we've got some great foster carers who really, you know, they see their children who they're caring for are their children. They understand that those children have, you know, got birth parents outside of their homes, and they're very good at maintaining those links with birth parents where it's right to do so. But they are very protective and very supportive of their children who are living with them. And I think we see that happening. You know, that plays out across our outcomes for children in our care. So, you know, we've seen this year, over the summer of last year, we saw for the 7th year, our GCSE outcomes get better for children in our care. And we had 18 children go to university. The previous year, we had 28 children go to university. So there's some really good stuff happening in terms of our outcomes for children who are in our care. And that is because of the kind of care they're receiving through our foster carers and through our really skilled residential workers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jo. Thank you. Thank you for that comprehensive answer. In terms of the budget, Jo, where would you like to see changes or
yeah.
What's
the big cost
in your
increase.
head?
Yeah, the big cost increase, which Fiona touched on, is really those children who have got very complex needs, who come into our care, and we need, because of the level of their need, we need to put together really intensive packages of support. And those can cost a lot per week. It's not unusual across the country to see care packages, including the cost of accommodation, you know, be surplus to more than £10,000 a week. So, and we know that for those young children, they often need, you know, they need an approach which is both therapeutic as well as, you know, often they're deeply traumatized, and we need to, if we really are going to support children to grow up to be great adults and have jobs and live independently, we really need to address all of their needs. I'm really excited, therefore, and Fiona touched on it, we're opening in April of this year. A small home for children who've got those type of needs, and we've done that collaboratively with our health partners. And I think we probably need to see more of that, Stella. You know, that joint coming together across health and social care to make sure we're creating the right kind of places for children and young people, and also within our foster carers, making sure that they've got for their children the right level of therapeutic support going in.
Good to see your ambitions becoming reality. You've gone quiet.
I've stopped because I saw a number of hands go up, and I wondered, Chair, whether you wanted to...
Don't stop because of a hand.
No, that's fine.
Please don't stop because of a hand. We're listening.
No, I'll let Sarah
Marius
have a follow on. Yeah.
Marius, thank you, Jo.
Thank you, Chair. Fiona, sorry, Jo. Thank you, Jo, as well. I guess slightly different, but it is on the same theme with regards to costs as well. So we've seen an increase in court applications for safeguarding interventions, and so I guess in my mind, there are kind of two questions that pop out in my mind at the moment. It's how do you relieve the pressure, and at what cost, and what you're doing about that, and at the same time, how you can then sustain whatever plan you put in place going forward. So how you can sustain a reduction in those in that support. Because again, there is a cost involved in these, you know, in going through courts, etc., as we know, and you have to pay for solicitors, etc. So I'm just wondering how you're going to look at that, because that's another element as part of this.
Yeah, well, actually, we haven't seen an increase in court or care applications in the last 12 months. In the last 12 months, we've seen them go down, and they're actually as low as they've ever been. So we're averaging around 8 a month. I think what we did see in 2021 is we did see it go up. So, you know, you're right. In 2021, we saw them on average. We had, I think it was 14 in October 2021. It went up to 6 on average, around 16 by December. But because of the work we've been doing, we've seen that not just go down, but stabilize at around 8 a month, and in December we saw 7. So and that has been because of the work we've been doing in that space, really building. You know, I've mentioned our family safeguarding approach. You know, that's how we do this work. It's direct work with families who've got very complex needs that worry us, and we really look at how we motivate and build on those family strengths, and we're really clear with families about the changes we need to see so that we can avoid going to court, and we work collaboratively with families and successfully with families to reduce the risk and keep children safely within their homes. And that is why we've got one of the lowest numbers of children in care as a proportion of our population in the whole of the country.
So, Joe, that's fantastic. So I just want to ask a follow-up, I guess, as well. So what you're highlighting there is great at a high level. Is there anything specifically that you can potentially share with us with regards to best practice that can then potentially then be shared with the rest of the country as well? Because if we are leading rather than lagging, you know, we could be potentially sharing that across
and
the whole of the UK.
So we our family safeguarding approach, we've supported over 20 local authorities across the country to take it on. So some of our neighbouring local authorities have got it, but as you know, as far north as Lancashire. So you know, it's been rolled out, and the Hertfordshire Family Safeguarding Centre is at the centre of that. So it is all about strength-based direct work with children and young people. You know, less paperwork at a table for social workers, making sure that social workers are out with families, that they know our families, they do that direct work, but most importantly, that we bring in other professionals, multidisciplinary approach. So we have within our family safeguarding approach, practitioners who work with parents around their mental health, around domestic abuse, and around drug and alcohol, because we know that those challenges are some of the key factors that impact on children's well-being. So we address a whole family approach, and it's that multidisciplinary approach together with the use of motivational interviewing techniques and structured ways of working with children that really makes a difference. And we are sharing that. You're absolutely right to say we should be sharing it, and we are.
Fantastic. That's great news. Thank you.
If I could just come in on that as well, Mara. So you'd asked about sharing the information. Actually, the Hertfordshire Family Safeguarding Model was referenced in the recent Josh McAllister review as best practice. So it certainly is recognised around the country, and to have up to 20 local authorities adopting that model as well, because they can see the impact of the multidisciplinary work, the motivational interviewing that Joe mentioned, and it's about, you know, creating a relationship with parents and to see what changes they can make and need to make to care for their children safely. And that's then we've added to that with our Invest to Transform programme, which is a 5.4 million investment, and that's building on the family safeguarding model, and that's about reunifying children with their families, getting children back out of care into families where it's safe to do so. And that's a pilot which we've only recently started, so it's probably too early to see the results yet, but that could help to bring an additional 110 children out of care. So that's in addition to the children who already leave care. So that's another avenue, if you like, that we're taking. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona, and thank you, Joe. Thank you, Marius. Councillor Watkin, and then Councillor Tallon.
Thank you very much, Stella. You can call me Mark if you like. I just wanted to go back on the complexity of children in care. The Children's Commissioner was on the radio this morning talking about the urgent need to have siblings placed together if at all possible. Now, clearly, that means that we don't necessarily have, I don't know how we've recruited foster carers in the past. I suspect If they want to take a child, that's fine. So I'm just wondering how you see this as an additional challenge. Are you able to accommodate siblings regularly, or will this add a further element to it? I mean, it seems morally absolutely the right thing to do. I'm just really wanting to know whether it's going to cause additional pressures on your service.
Mark, that's a very interesting question, and I didn't hear the Commissioner this morning. Before I bring Jo in, and she can answer on the operational side of whether, how many of our foster carers can take siblings. At our recent foster carers conference, a care experienced, she's an author, stood up and spoke, and actually her really key message was that she, at the time when she was taken into care, she didn't want to be in care with her siblings, because I think she'd spent so long trying to protect and look after them in the absence of responsible parents, that actually that was the last thing she would have wanted. So what I would say is I think there's probably an element, actually it also needs to come down to the child's needs. So it can't just be a diktat that actually, all siblings will be put into care together and placed in care, because actually that might not be the best thing for the children. So, but obviously in terms of how adaptable our foster carers are, I know we have some who take sibling groups, but Jo, have you anything else to add on that?
No, I think you said it. We take a very child-centred approach. So where it's appropriate for siblings to be placed together, then we really try hard to make sure that happens, and we've recruited a variety of foster carers to that end. For some children it might not be the right thing, but we take a child-centred approach, and I completely agree with Mark. Where it's in their interest to be placed with siblings, then we try really hard to make sure that works.
Yeah, that's very reassuring. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sarah Tallon.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to say thank you as well very much for your comprehensive answers. I appreciate and hugely welcome the clear emphasis on a strategy to ensure the supply of foster carers meets demand. What is the expected impact on our budget for this recruitment drive, and what is our approach to mitigate any overspend?
So our foster care strategy was really based on an invest to save. So by investing in recruiting more foster carers, what we're doing is bearing down on the costs of more expensive placements, Sarah. So we see this as a way of continuing to bear down on the costs of really expensive out of county placements for children where they're placed too far away from their families and their schools and their communities, and keeping children locally. So it doesn't just make sense for the outcomes of children and young people, it makes business sense for the public purse. So we haven't, this is very much around invest in order to take cost out of the system in the longer term. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Going to keep it moving through our schedule this morning and through our timetable too. The next key line of inquiry is going to be picked up by Councillor Lawrence Brass. Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Lawrence Brass. I'm the County Councillor for Bushy North. I noticed on page 78 of the papers we've been given that there's been an increase in the number of separated migrant children coming into care. Before I ask my question, I'm wondering if one of our officers could just give me a very brief definition of what they understand by the phrase separated migrant children.
Certainly, I can do that. I mean, separated migrant children used to be called, I think the terminology changed at the end of last year in the autumn, used to be called unaccompanied asylum seeking children, or we abbreviate it to UASC. I've lost you on my screen, apologies, Lawrence. Oh, there you are. Used to be called UASC. So what we're referring to as separated migrant children are children who are coming from other countries and they are not accompanied by an adult, a carer or a parent.
Oh, I'm grateful for that. So it wouldn't really refer to the Afghani families and such
No.
like that have arrived because they've come with their mothers
With
and
families.
fathers.
That's it entirely.
So they're really asylum seekers.
Yeah, yes.
Sexually, yes.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying that. So my question is, if there has been, as we're told, an increase in this category of separated migrant children, which has resulted in a large proportion of non-separated migrant children being placed in external foster care, what steps are you taking to make sure the added financial pressure is met and ensure the solution is suitably sustainable?
Fiona, did you want me to answer that
yes,
question?
please.
I'm happy to.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brass. And I was delighted just to hear that question, because I think the first thing to say is we're really proud in Hertfordshire of how proactive we've been to welcome separated migrant children within Hertfordshire and to settle them and to meet their needs. And we've got, again, some great outcomes for some of our separated migrant children. Only at the end of last year, you know, I was chatting to one of them who's studying medicine at university. So and he came from Afghanistan, but a number of years ago. So there's some really good work that happens. But you're absolutely right. We have, in recent years, as every other local authority really across the country has seen, an increase in numbers of children who are separated migrant children who are coming over either as part of the National Transfer Scheme, and that is the scheme, the government scheme, which means that every local authority needs to take a proportionate number of separated migrant children into their area. So children don't necessarily settle in the local authority in which they arrive, and they are redistributed across the country. So we've seen an increase in children coming in through that National Transfer Scheme, but also what we deem spontaneous arrivals, so children who just turn up in Hertfordshire by other means. And with that, of course, we see that sort of increase in the financial pressures that you've talked about, both in terms of placement and the homes we create for those children, but also the wraparound support costs associated with it. We do get a Home Office grant that contributes towards this. So I think last year it was in the region of around 7 million, and that largely covers the costs of accommodation. Many of our children, separated migrant children who come into our care, are aged 16 and above. So many of them we're placing in supported accommodation, either in Hertfordshire or nearby, and providing with the right level of support. There are some additional costs in terms of, as you can imagine, the staffing involved, the staff teams. And last year we created a third staff team to support our separated migrant children. So we are having to grow some of our support services, and that's not covered by the grant. So the council is funding that. So in terms of what do we do about it? I mean, there's a number of different things that we're doing, partly, and we've already touched on this, so I won't go into detail, but it's around our strategy around how we create within Hertfordshire the right kind of placements, because if we're creating them and working with them, they're more effective and they're more efficient in terms of use of public resources. We also continue to raise the increasing costs with central government, you know, pointing out to the Home Office that the grant that we get doesn't wholly meet the cost of meeting need, and we continue to do that. But you know, I think there'll also be a conversation within the integrated plan as we move forward around actually how do we continue to invest and make sure that we're meeting needs. So I would anticipate that will be a conversation throughout the next IP process. Fiona, did you want to add to that at all? Because it's certainly a priority for us, and it's something that we take very seriously. Separated migrant children under the Children Act, they are children in need, and all of our separated migrant children are in care under Section 20, and we have the same rights and responsibilities towards those children as we do for any child who comes into our care.
Yeah, I would add to that, as Joe has said, we're proud of how we have responded to to looking after the separated migrant children coming into Hertfordshire, and created an additional team to support them. And of course, as Joe has said, it's not just about the placements, it's about the wraparound care that these children need. But you're right, there is a budgetary pressure, and we will be keeping a very close eye on it and continue to draw attention to that at high level. So, with the government and East of England LGA, because actually every local authority will be facing similar situation. Thank you.
Chairman, can I just supplementary on that one before colleagues come in? You say that the age is 16 plus. Presumably the maximum age is 18, is it?
Well,
So yeah. Go on, Fiona.
So I think what Joe was saying was many of the children, separated migrant children, come to us when they're nearly 16, at which point then they transfer out into care leave. So yeah, move on.
Yeah, so that's absolutely right, Fiona. So what's happening? Most children, separated migrant children who come into Hertfordshire in that sort of 16 to 18 age range, and they become children in our care. After the age of 18, they progress into becoming care leavers. And we have a large cohort of care leavers. Once they're care leavers, Councillor Brass, the threshold of 0.1%, which is the threshold set by central government, that we should take separated migrant children as a proportion of our overall under 18 population. I know that's a bit technical, but that's how it works. So we have never met that threshold because so many of our children quickly become care leavers, and that does not count against the threshold. So we've got a large cohort of separated migrant children in our care leaver population too, and we provide a lot of support to them to make sure that they grow up and transition into adulthood in a really successful way.
Of course, the age situation is very topical and controversial, and you know the Bournemouth case, and in my experience dealing for many years with asylum seekers, it's very difficult sometimes to identify the correct age. So that's an issue that I'm sure you're on top of. The other point that in your response that you made was about Home Office grants, and I would only urge and really very strongly urge that pressure is put on the Home Office to pick up as many tabs as they can in this matter, because certainly as far as the Afghanis are concerned, where the Home Office accepted the responsibility to take them into housing, I've discovered that it's the more you nag and you shout, the more the Home Office will suddenly get busy. So, there is money there in the central government, and it would be releasing funds from Hertfordshire. So never be shy to shout at the Home Office, please, because there is money there if you press hard enough.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Good tip, Lawrence. Thank you.
What a dream. Nigel.
No, it's really Lawrence really touched on that, and Joe mentioned it now he did in our answer about that 7 million. But if we just get clear, because obviously this is about budgetary today, isn't it? And the point is, when Joe's saying, can she just be clear, or I don't know if it's Rachel, be clear on what out of that 7 million we can't use, or what the difference is? Because clearly, as Lawrence said, the administration should be pushing more, and I've been raising this at Children's Services in a budget for the last couple of years on this. They've changed the names and that, but even so, can we be really clear what it does cover and doesn't cover that 7 million grant? I mean, I'm not saying you have to go into all the details now, but it would be interesting to know that, and that I assume you're getting together with other local authorities, Essex and Kent and all the others, Surrey or whatever. But it would be interesting to know when you say, oh, well, that doesn't cover that, then that's what we should be putting for. So it's not fair. It's not fair on the council taxpayers of Hertfordshire.
We do have those figures, and in fact they were in a recent paper that came to Children and Young People's panel. So what I can tell you is, I mean, the Home Office grant is calculated on a sort of daily and weekly basis for children in our care and children leaving our care. And it mostly, like I said, covers the cost of supporting children and young people, and the budget gap, if you like, is in surplus of 2 million, because it doesn't cover the costs of the staffing that we put behind that. So it's not, I mean, it is something that we've reported through council towards the back end of last year, and it is something that we have raised with the Home Office. But listening to Lawrence, I'll continue to do that.
Good.
Likewise.
Thank you.
We'll push
Thank
for.
you.
Thank you.
Maybe we could follow through, Nigel, on
Yeah.
the paper that was sent to panel. Yes.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Let's follow through. Let's follow through on that. Okay. Moving forward. What a morning. Fantastic. Mark, you have a key line of inquiry question.
I do. Thank you very much. And it really follows on the theme of how successful we have been in keeping our numbers in CLA down way below most of the other local authorities. And on the back of that, you have put in place a really ambitious Invest to Transform programme over the next 3 years, going to save 5.735 million by 24-25, 11.39 million by 25-26. I mean, huge numbers. And yes, you are going to invest 5.5 million. So, I mean, my question really is, how, based on what you've already achieved, confident are you that you can achieve these reductions of 110 children in care? Following from that, what are the biggest risks that you see that might cause you difficulty to achieve what you want to set out to do?
Yeah, so I'll start, and then I'll ask Joe to come in with any additional detail. So you're absolutely right. The Invest to Transform project is about returning more children to home safely, and it's a pilot, and it's about focusing, it's building on the family safeguarding model and focusing on reunification, more intensive support with families to support children to return home safely. And we do see absolutely the benefits of that, and we are confident that based on our track record we will be able to deliver that. And the figure that we're talking about is an additional 110 children that we are looking to be able to return home. So it is in early days, which I think I mentioned earlier. It has not long started, so it's probably too early to give any positive feedback at the moment. But I'm confident that based on our track record, on our current low levels of children in care, that we will be able to deliver on this. Joe, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I think that's a good answer. And Mark, I think when you asked me a question, I thought, well, I'm based on our data, based on the evidence from our existing family safeguarding approach, based on the track record of Hertfordshire, I think I'm reasonably confident that we'll get this. However, you asked about risks, and who knows what's going to happen on a worldwide global level that can impact on some of this. But if I think about our Hertfordshire and how we do things, I think I'm reasonably confident and really excited about the programme. Fiona said it's only just got off the ground. The investment is that Fiona touched on is really achieving those additional 110 children over and above the children who would normally exit care, an additional 110 returning home safely and appropriately over the next few years. And we based that, and we did a bit of a deep dive into our children in care numbers, which were higher during the pandemic. And we looked at it, and we found that actually, whilst we've been doing a really good job at reducing the numbers of new children, particularly adolescents coming into care since 2018-19, what we were seeing are fewer children actually leaving care, and that predated the pandemic. It went back to 2017. So that's the rationale for this, and the main driver of the sort of increasing cost bit, as I've already said, the really expensive placements that we typically see teenagers go into. So within our approach, within our family safeguarding approach, we've got, our specialist adolescent team will be doing intensive work with young people when they first come into care to try and return them home in the first 3 to 4 months. But alongside that, we're taking a much more systemic approach, which recognises that some of the children who come into our care and indeed go into the sort of more complex residential specialist settings really need a therapeutic approach that works not just with them, but with their families. So we've wrapped around this, a trauma-informed approach, which really does tackle those adverse child experiences. We've wrapped around this family group conferences to really think about, the extended family, and actually if a particular young child can't go home to mum or dad, actually is there somebody else in their network who might be able to look after them. So we really are taking, I think, what is a sort of innovative approach and having a really wide lens on how we achieve this. And we've already seen, I mean, it is too early to say yes, it's a success. We've only had it running for a few months. However, we've already turned the curve. We are seeing some successes. We are seeing more children returning home. Our data over the last few months shows that, and our children in care numbers are now down to and on a par with the pre-pandemic levels. So we think we're already beginning to see the fruits of our labour, and we've got a cracking workforce sitting behind this who are really driving it.
Okay. May I respond, or at least come back with a comment, Della, if I may?
Please,
Look,
Mark.
obviously, nobody would wish you anything other than success in this programme. That's a given. My concern is, and I'm not sure you've really quite addressed it properly, fully. I apologise for that. Is that in one breath we're being told about the increased complexity of need that are coming through in children now coming into our care profile, both in terms of their behavioural background and medical and all the rest of it, and yet you're now saying, but we can reduce our CLA population by 10-15%, and there's a sort of mismatch in my concern that it's I'm going to use a terrible cliche. It's easy to do the early ones, now, but as that profile becomes more complicated, how confident are you that you'll continue to hit these numbers? It'll be fine saying in the next 6 months we've achieved this, that, and the other, but then you're going to get down to some really challenging children who will not be so easy to move into their home environment. So I sort of throw the challenge back at you and say, how confident are you in 2 years' time that move will continue in the rate that you've seen already? Because I think that's so much depends on this for your budget.
And let me answer, because as you were talking, Mark, I was thinking, what is different about what we're going to do? And the bit that's different that we've never done before is we're taking our family safeguarding approach and working with children in care. That's new. We've not done that before. And that brings in that multidisciplinary approach. So what we'll be doing differently, because these are children, as you say, with really complex needs, and they often come from families with really complicated and complex needs. So we will have within those teams, practitioners who address the parents' needs around whether that's domestic abuse or drug and alcohol or whatever it is. We will have adult practitioners working in a therapeutic way, both with the parents, carers, extended family, and the children. Now that is different to what we've done before. Previously, our looked after children didn't have a family safeguarding approach. So I think we're the first local authority to extend family safeguarding to this cohort of children. And I think it will make a difference because we've seen it make a difference to preventing children coming into care in the first place. So, this is not business as usual with our children looked after. This is something different and bringing in a different level of intervention.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you,
we
Joe.
might be asking this question again in a year's time to see how the picture looks.
Absolutely. But
Thank you.
I think
we will follow it. We will follow it.
Yeah. I think if
I think a natural key line of inquiry is now going to be asked by Councillor Fiona Guest. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you, Chairman. Right. My question refers to agency costs. That is, the current dependency of the service on agency staff represents a high cost burden. What steps are being taken by the service to lower the dependency of high cost agency staff in social work?
That's a very good question, Fiona, and clearly it's something that's impacting local authorities across the country, not just specific to Hertfordshire. And we have seen, especially over the last couple of years, a shift. And so, with regard to social workers, we know that many social workers have chosen to go into a different line of work following the pandemic, and that has impacted on numbers. And of course, when we are looking at recruitment and retention, recruitment in particular, it's a very competitive market. And so therefore, yes, we are using agency workers. We're hopeful that we're expecting the government's response to to the social care review, and part of that we're hoping will address one of the issues, which is whereby newly qualified social workers who currently, as soon as they qualify, could become agency workers. There is a proposal that actually that would be restricted for a period of a year or 2 years so that they could gain the experience before they then would move over to agency. So that's just as an aside, something that's happening nationally that we're watching and waiting to see, and we're actually expecting that report to come out very soon, I think probably this week or next week. With regard to the specifics of managing agency, Joe, I'll bring you in here if you don't mind on the operational side. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Fiona. And I agree. I think it's a really good question, Fiona. So thank you for asking it. And our workforce, our staff, are the bedrock of what we do. Having a permanent, stable staff or workforce is critical to driving up best outcomes for children and young people. I know that children want the same social worker who knows them working with them. I know that children with SEND want a stable workforce working with them. So this is at the forefront of one of our priorities within the Children's Services Plan. And you're absolutely right. In Hertfordshire and across the country, yes, we're relying increasingly on agency to fill vacancy rates, particularly within social work. Our turnover rates and our vacancy rates, our social work vacancy rates in Hertfordshire still benchmark really well. It is worth saying that we've still got lower numbers of agency than a lot of other places. So our social work vacancy rates around 11.4%. And I think that compares to 16% England average and 19% statistical neighbours. So we're doing well. But that said, we want to drive down on the use of agency and drive down on the cost of using agency because it does cost much more. And there's a number of different levers that we're pulling operationally to that. I mean, first and foremost, it's our recruitment and retention strategy. How do we market ourselves so that everybody thinks that Hertfordshire is a great place to come and work? I know from talking to my staff that work here that they think it's a great place to work, but we need to market that and share that and really get on the front foot. And that's in hand. There's a really strong marketing strategy that we're working on. Our career pathway that we offer everybody who works in children's services, again, it's not just about marketing it, it's about really being clear about the strengths of that. So we, whether it's apprenticeships, how we support people to step up into social work, right through to the support we give to our leaders to go on aspiring leadership courses or undertake our practice supervision development programme. We've wrapped around our workforce a practice academy, and Fiona, talked about the residential academy that we've set up, because recruiting people to work in our residential children's homes again is a key priority, and where we really don't want to be relying on agency. And another really important lever is what I think of as the in-job benefits that we offer our workforce. And that's not just about pay, it is about pay, but it's also about other factors: workload, management, relationships, the level of supervision, the culture, whether we give all of our staff, our workforce, a sense of belonging and ownership within Hertfordshire. And our diversity and inclusion work we've been doing in children's services and across all of the departments is really working to land that piece. And then lastly, on a national level, and Fiona touched on this, but I think, this is on the central government's radar. We see too many, not just in Hertfordshire, across the country, too many people qualified to become a social worker and then quickly move off to do agency work because of the pay that you can get doing agency work. And I know that government are looking at that, because my view is that, agency workers need to be experienced. If you bring them in, you're bringing them in to do a critical job. Newly qualified, so there need to be some parameters around whether newly qualified can go off and do agency work. And I know that recommendation that's come through people like me and others doing this job, is being considered. And within the Eastern region, we have a memorandum of understanding, an MOU, that really puts some shared practice around how much we pay agency workers, how much we use agency workers. And again, I think central government is looking on, how do you roll that kind of best practice out so that all areas have those MOUs in place? Because if we're doing that, we need our neighbouring areas to be doing the same. I'll stop there. I saw a couple of hands going up, but yeah.
Thank you. Lawrence, you have your hand up, and then Fiona.
Yes, just a brief question. Could you, this might be a painful question to ask, but per hour as a social worker, what it would be the extra that you would get if you were doing the same job through an agency?
The agency rates can vary, but it can be as high as £45 an hour, 50, some even going up to 50, 48, £50 if they're seniors. I've seen those rates really go sky high.
£45 an hour. And the establishment and the standard what we're offering is how much an hour?
Yeah, I'm trying to do the maths in my head, Lawrence, because I know how much social workers get paid a year. I haven't got how it, but it's a lot less. I can tell you that. Rachel's on the course; you might be able to do the quick maths. But entry-level social workers coming in around 25k a year, that kind of thing. It makes business sense to have permanent staff, but it makes sense for our children and young people too, in terms of continuity. None of us want to be using agency staff. There'll always be a need for some level of agency, but what we've seen certainly since the pandemic are people re-evaluating social work as a career path and moving into other career paths, and that's happened. We know that's happened across the country. And it's not just social work, it's other professions too. So we have, this really is about how do we get people to come and work for Hertfordshire and stay with Hertfordshire? And we've got a lot of people who do stay here. We've got some really long-standing experienced teams in Hertfordshire.
We clearly need to upgrade the pay so there's not such a big differential, but that's a story for another day, I think.
But our pay benchmarks, I should say, our pay for social workers qualified benchmarks really well. We benchmark really well with London, outer London boroughs and neighbouring authorities, and we reviewed all of that about 12 months ago. So but it is around what agency workers can attract if they don't work for a local authority.
And just to reiterate how this is a national issue, I was having a conversation with a lead member for Children's Services from the north of the country recently, and she said, so, how do you attract staff? Because we're really struggling to attract social workers. So, this is a national issue. It is widespread, but I think, as Joe's outlined, we do a lot to make Hertfordshire an attractive place to come and work, and career development is important, and absolutely money will always be an issue, but actually if we can add on additional benefits, then we are in a better position to attract our staff, and that's better ultimately for our children and young people.
Thank you, Fiona. Agree. We've just done the maths. £45 an hour. Salary per year on a certain amount of hours is 99k. A lot of money.
Thank you, Stella.
A lot of money. Yeah, Fiona.
Well, thank you, Chairman. In Hertfordshire, we have the long history of growing our own, and this residential caseworker academy, it's a very good idea, but it won't achieve anything if it hasn't got any students. So what are we doing to promote residential care work and children's social work as careers? And is there a budget for that?
I can answer that question. I think so, and you're absolutely right. I mean, we've got a few. So our academies around residential because it's all about that. It's a partnership with Hertfordshire Uni, and our whole academy for children's social workers is also a partnership approach with the university. So it really is about putting in place that career path and thinking about progression. We are just completing a review of the job families for our residential settings in Hertfordshire and thinking about how we build career paths into that. So we're setting that alongside the work we're doing with the university, where we are thinking about how we develop people's skills, develop their opportunities, both to move up in residential work, and we don't want everyone to leave residential work. We want that to be a place that people can develop and grow into, but also, you know, if they do want to then move on and be a qualified social worker, how do we support that cohort to step into social work and we still keep them in Hertfordshire? So it's exactly that we're doing through our academy, Fiona, as you set out, thinking about career pathways and having some really ambitious plans around that.
Thank you. Thank you. Nothing wrong with ambition. It's there for all of us, as we're here today. Leading naturally again into that is another key line of inquest of inquiry, and Councillor Dee Hart is going to follow through.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Councillor Dee Hart for the Waltham Cross Division, Borough of Broxbourne. My question is, pressures on partners can impact the ability to provide services and work efficiently in partnership. What safeguards are in place to ensure effective monitoring of partners and that these risks are mitigated so as to have minimal effect on services going forward? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dee, and thank you for your question. And yes, we have very strong partnerships across Hertfordshire, and that's something I've come to be very aware of over the last 8 months. And of course, we have, if you like, we have our partnerships, so our statutory partners, police and health, with our Safeguarding Children's Partnership Board, and then we have partners who will deliver services and who we commission, and it's about having the strong relationships with those. And I know Joe will be able to go into a bit more detail about how we then monitor the progress and outcomes. But for those of us who sit on the children's panel, you will recall we had a recent report brought to us, and that was talking about the work with health, in particular with regard to therapeutic services, and how that's been managed, an action plan. There were some COVID legacy issues whereby staff had been transferred over to work in hospitals, and that had created a backlog in terms of therapies. And so that we were presented with a paper which outlined actually the measures that were put in place to monitor this going forward, to bring it back on track. So I would say we have a strong history of you know, frequent and close monitoring, certainly, and good relationships with partners, which enables us to have conversations that we need to if we think, okay, actually we need to focus on a particular issue. And I'm going to hand over to Joe, who will be able to give far more detail about the operational side. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. I think you really covered it. So I think it's again another really good question. I think you're right, Dee. We know that when there's financial pressure on any organisation, including our partners, you know, there's always a temptation to start looking inwards rather than take a partnership lens and work in silos. I think what I can say about that is in Hertfordshire, we have got really strong partnerships across health, across schools and education, across police, across the voluntary sector. There's some really good partnerships and really strong governance structures around that to make sure that we continue to take joint accountability for outcomes for children and young people, to hold one another to account, and take responsibility for making changes where they're needed. And we monitor through those partnerships. I mean, the governance is all around how do we know what difference are we making, what more can we do. So some examples of that are Hertfordshire Safeguarding Children's Partnership. I mean, Fiona's given you a couple of examples, but you know, certainly within that we brought in that collaborative funding across the 3 statutory partners, so the local authority, health and the police, to bring in more funding and resources into our front door in the face of the increased demand that we've been seeing in recent years. We've got a health and wellbeing board, and the integrated care partnership, which has put, you know, best outcomes for children and young people, giving them the best start in life, right at the forefront. So through that partnership, we will drive and strengthen our current family centre offer into becoming family hubs. And again, that partnership will provide accountability as well as responsibility across that. Our schools forum is a really strong forum in Hertfordshire. I know that some members may well be be represented there. And again, that's where we really do work with schools around having a really broad lens on the funding, the resources that are available to make sure that all of our children in Hertfordshire get a great education. And again, we've got some really great outcomes. Over 90%, I think it's about 92% of Hertfordshire schools are now good and outstanding. So there's some really good stuff that happens. But we're not scared to, we're not afraid in Hertfordshire of having challenging conversations in those partnerships because they are so strong. So it's a really high level of challenge as well as support that runs right through those partnerships. And I think that's why collectively we continue to make a difference, a really good difference to the lives of children, young people here. So I'll stop there and see if there's any sort of follow-on questions.
I think it's fair to say we're data rich. So, Joe touched on performance monitoring, and that's a really key part. And again, for those of us who sit on Children and Young People panel, we have the performance indicators coming forward through the regular partnership meetings, the Safeguarding Children's Board, the Health and Wellbeing Board. We're constantly reviewing data. And in fact, we've recently been awarded a grant from DLUC, and that's to deliver a project as part of Data Accelerator program. So data is really key, and performance is really key. So yes, we monitor very closely.
Thank you. What was the grant? How much was the grant?
Oh,
good question. I'm not even going to guess because I can't remember off the top of my head. We only got it in the last few weeks. But it's a really exciting grant to think about. How we look at our data and how we use our data to inform practice. So, but I can't remember off the top of my head. So
Rachel made. I don't know. I'm looking at you, Rachel. I don't know if you know that. If Paul,
I think I do. I just checked it with the team, so I've just sent what I think to the team. They're going to check so I don't quote a wrong figure. If I get it in time, I can mention it.
We literally have only been notified within the last couple of weeks, so it's very fresh off the press.
I know we carry so many figures around in our heads as well for different reasons.
The main thing is, Stella, that we got the grant. So actually, that's the bit to focus on.
Absolutely, definitely. Money is there. The grant is there. Fantastic.
Yeah.
I see no further questions. And no hands up. Have I missed anyone or missing anything or hands not working? Wow. Dare I say it? We have gone through our key line of inquiry. We're going to take a break shortly, and members of the panel will meet back in 20 minutes. That's 12:20. And I would just like to say a big thank you to our executive member, Fiona Thompson, and to Joe, and to Rachel. You're kind of down the bottom end of that screen down there, coming in as you do. To say thank you for everything that you do,
Shelley,
and accepting the pressure today. Sorry, Mark.
I'm sorry. I just thought, and it may be presumptuous, and Joe, you may not be able to give much an answer, but how is the Ofsted review going, ILAC review going at the moment? What's the state of play?
I wouldn't want to jinx it,
Yeah,
Mark,
you see that window behind her opening, Mark? Yeah. She's going to jump it.
No, I think it's fair to say, Mark, the inspection is ongoing. I think that's probably as much as we can say at the moment.
Yeah.
But of course, as soon as we do have information to share, we will do. But just to let members know, Joe and her team, Elle, Miranda, Simon, Hero and their teams have just done an amazing job over the last 2 weeks, and huge thanks to all of them, because it is having an inspection is it can
inspection.
be. It's an
inspection,
absolutely, and we have Absolutely. And we've lots that we're very proud of that we want to share, and we know there's more that we can do better. So, you know, it's all of that. And then to have the IP in the middle of it has been a bonus. So thank you for that.
That's one way of putting it. So just very quickly, when do you expect to be able to sort of share some sort of feedback outcome from
The judgment will be embargoed until mid-March, Mark.
Till March. Okay, thanks, Jim.
March,
Although I suspect we might get something from you under the radar maybe before then, I hope. But we'll talk about that separately. But thank you for that and good luck. I hope it's they're all sticking on. Okay.
Chairman, when we meet at 12:20, how long do you anticipate that session will last?
20 minutes.
Thank you.
Colleagues, can I thank you
I could feel it as
Yeah, it's very hard to have preset timings because things can't, people don't, we're not automata.
Chairman.
Exactly. And the emotion that comes with a portfolio like that, everything that goes with it. And
Yeah.
Chairman,
stay on one question for a really long time. You could do a question a morning, couldn't you?
Chairman, we're live. We're live.
Thank you.
And of course, the big challenge from my point of view, and I think most of us, is the SEND challenge.
Yep,
and of course, that's this afternoon. So that was the sort of the elephant in the room, in a sense.
Right, we're back on it. We're back on air, as they say, and I'd like to welcome you all back and thank each and every one of you for this morning. We have Artemis with us, and Artemis is, I believe, going to be summing up this morning and the recommendations to follow.
Thank you, Chair. Artemis,
and then we will discuss amongst the approval of that. Thank you, Artemis.
Sorry, Chair. Artemis Cassie, Head of Scrutiny. Just to capture some of your discussions this morning. So in summary, I have that the good financial management of children's services has been recognised by peer review and it's kept under monthly review. Whilst there are higher levels of complexity, the Families First approach of Hertfordshire has been used nationally, and the work with over 16,000 families, only a small number progress onto statutory services, underlining the continued importance of early help as demonstrated by the Hertfordshire approach. And continuing with that theme, early help is key to ensuring that increasing levels of complexity do not become unmanageable and therefore costly. Hertfordshire tries to maintain in-house residential and in-county placements as its strategy, which has a significant impact combined with growing talent and expertise through developing its social care worker talent. Hertfordshire is pushing forwards on developing a network of mutually supporting foster carers, driving down out-of-county need and out-of-county placements. And members heard about the Mockingbird programme this morning. Members also heard about the decrease in court placements down to and stabilising at 8 per month, whereas last year it was around the 14 to 16 per month. And this is through a direct approach of working with families, including a wrapped around approach, incorporating holistic strategies, mental health and therapeutic. And it also includes extending beyond the nuclear family to incorporate working with and including the extended family. Hertfordshire has also been working to support neighbouring and other local authorities to roll out the Hertfordshire approach towards a child-centred care for children in Hertfordshire. Members also heard about the use of strategies and front-loading investment to take out costs later, saving the public purse, including the Invest to Transform pilot programme. We also heard about the support of separated migrant children in Hertfordshire, especially as they progress to being care leavers. And 2 final points in summary, members discussed the cost of use of agency social workers and how Hertfordshire uses various levers at its disposal to reduce that use and reliance, including making Hertfordshire an attractive place to work in and offering interesting career development and progression. And finally, members heard about the strong partnership relationships, including with statutory partners, such as the Health Authority and the police, with a focus on joint responsibility, joint accountability and strong governance. So with all of that in mind, the recommendations that we have captured from this morning are, we captured 4 from your discussions, and that Hertfordshire should explore and apply for commissioning funding with Public Health jointly to ensure funding for its ambitions and funding for Hertfordshire's families with needs. A second recommendation, to continue sharing information and learning beyond Hertfordshire of its programmes and strategies as piloted and implemented within the county. A third recommendation, to continue to monitor budgetary pressures, including in Hertfordshire's support of separated migrant children.
Yeah.
And as part of this, to include lobbying of central government for releasing funds to local government, including Hertfordshire, for its continuing support of separated migrant children. And then as the fourth recommendation, Hertfordshire to continue to lobby at national level around newly qualified social workers gaining experience before moving across to agency work, and as part of that, Hertfordshire continuing to develop career paths and opportunities to ensure retention of its social workers within Hertfordshire. And I have 3 actions. To obtain the paper from the recent Children in Care panel concerning the £7 million funding, and that will be circulated to members. Second action, to follow up on the hourly rates for a social worker employed by Hertfordshire versus a social worker employed via an agency. And then final action point, to obtain clarification on the DLUC funding and the amount. And I hand back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Artemis. Marius, you have your hand up. What I would like everyone now to do is get in there and approve these or add to them, to the skeleton that we've been presented with. Marius?
Before we add, and Artemis, thank you for that. Before we add or I guess approve anything at the moment, I had a question on one of the points Artemis made, which was around, I can't remember what the word she used now. It wasn't escalating. It was to kind of go back to national government on one of the points around the care workers. I didn't quite understand.
Lobbying.
I mean, yeah, lobbying. That was the word, lobbying. Thank you. I'm not quite sure what the specific action on that one was. That's why I was I'd like to challenge that. I don't know what the recommendation is. What are we lobbying for? Why are we expecting government to do something that we should be able to do ourselves?
I'm with you there, Marius. I don't recall that.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that came from.
With respect, it was an issue that I raised, and about trying to press the Home Office to pick up more of the tab.
You did.
And
you did.
I agree.
You did, Lawrence. You
but
agrees,
Lawrence,
yeah.
sorry, just double clarify what Lawrence is saying. Yeah, so you were actually picking up the tab, weren't you, Lawrence? Not actually about training and everything. Sorry, Artemis, can you just read that out again?
Take more of the financial burden, as they are doing in other spheres.
Absolutely. I recall that, and I have that down.
Could we just double check that then?
Didn't hear the word lobbying. That's what I didn't hear. But recalling the financial, absolutely.
Yeah,
Lawrence brought that up.
Yeah.
And I acknowledge that as well. I agree.
So shall I just run through what I said again? Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Can you put it on
just one of
screen?
those. It's just one of those moments, Artemis.
Can we see it?
What's in our heads and how it sounds.
So recommendation 3, so to continue to monitor budgetary pressures, including in Hertfordshire's support of separated migrant children. And as part of this recommendation, lobbying of central government for releasing funds to local government, including Hertfordshire, for its support of separated migrant children. There was also lobbying in the 4th recommendation, so I wonder whether in my speed of relaying things within a 5-minute time frame, the two got a bit conflated.
So that bit's fine. That bit's fine. I think
we
Lawrence
agree. We agree.
That bit's fine.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's about the extra.
Can I actually?
Sorry, Nigel. I'll come back to you.
I want to just challenge that, if I may. I think the language you used, Artemis, suggests that it could be we're getting no funds from central government. It's sufficient funds, because we are getting money, but we're not getting enough. So I just think that language about lobbying government for funds,
releasing further funds, increased funds.
I think sufficient, but further, something along those lines. We must acknowledge we are getting money. It's just that we're not getting enough.
But the increase is sufficient.
Yeah.
Nigel.
I mean, as Joe said, we're getting 7 million. The grant is 7 million, but the money that the county's having to spend in answer to Lawrence and that is obviously more than that for accommodation and other things that we've got to spend, and that's what we're lobbying for, that extra on top of the 7 million.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, because most of that 7 million, I recall, is on accommodation.
Yeah, but they
The
haven't
Home Office
spent.
grant of 7 million is on accommodation. That's what I put down.
Yeah, but we're having to spend other things on training.
We want sufficient funds to cover more our needs. Sufficient funds. So the million has been accounted for. You know, it's when people throw numbers out. So what's 4 million? What's 4 billion? What it's what, you know, it's what can you do with it? Where does it go? Lawrence.
Well, I just would think on the wording, can we not say pressurise rather than lobby? Pressurise central government to increase.
Yeah, I agree.
Pressurise to increase. Yeah,
I prefer that. Personally, that is pressurise rather than lobbying.
Right.
I think lobbying a group of students.
I'm not a politician, so I don't know what the actual
terminology. I
don't know what the terminology is used, but I've always heard lobbying. But that's
pressurise is what we're doing. Well, that's what we're going to do. That's what we want to do. We want to put the government under pressure. Not necessarily lobbying them. No.
Yeah, I get it.
It's a different kind
of.
You
are a politician, Marios. I don't know what you're kidding yourself for.
It's a very good one. That was politically well put, Marius.
What it means now is you have to stand with placards outside the Home Office. That's what this means.
That's the difference. Yeah.
Well, if we have to, we need the money.
It's through letters.
Just checking the terminology there then, since the fourth recommendation also used the word lobby, shall I read it again?
Please.
So continuing to lobby at national level around newly qualified social workers gaining experience before doing agency work, and within Hertfordshire to continue to develop career paths and opportunities to ensure retention of social workers within the county. So just to reassure members, this is so that you are able to discuss the recommendations, but we will put it into writing so that you can have an opportunity to see it. I appreciate how it's not always very easy to hear the words, and we have a short amount of time in which to absorb the recommendations.
If I can make a comment, I think there's a fundamental difference between the two issues. One is definitely we are losing money every day, so we need urgent action. The other one is the direction of travel about policy changing at central government. And I think lobbying is probably a better term for what we're trying to do there, to get the Children's Services, Children's Act to sort of recognise that there needs to be, you know, more training given to social workers before they can be allowed to operate in independent, you know, contracted work. So I would say lobby feels better for that context.
That one, yeah, not the first one.
Would we put the career path, would we put that first though? I mean, the career path, that's the answer. That is probably 75% of the answer. And then lobbying the government is to follow the career path as well. We're providing a career path.
But my understanding was from Jo that the concern she has is that insufficiently experienced social workers are coming in to fill the gap because they haven't been, if you like, there's no protection against a brand new social worker being redirected towards us to take on what could be a very challenging situation. So I think it's a government statutory thing. That's how I read it, but I maybe, you know, that's my view.
Hi, it's actually Cheryl Hunter, but it's Cheryl Hunter. Sorry.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I don't know if I'm meant to be in this group or not, to be honest.
Are you meant to be in education, Cheryl? Hello, it's Stella.
Hi, yeah. Well, I'm not sure, but I do have a point to make. If I can make the point, is that okay?
Who are you here for? Instead of John? Are you here instead of John?
Well, I don't know. So would you rather me leave? Would you rather me leave?
I know you. And you sit on our committees.
I'm a parent representative.
It's
parent governor representative.
I will ask for the. I don't have a personal issue. I will take guidance on the appropriateness of joining the meeting at this time.
Okay.
At this point.
I was in the meeting earlier,
right,
as well, but I don't know how it all works, and I wasn't involved in any pre-meeting or anything. So should I leave? Should I leave?
I'm afraid I think we have to say yes, if I may.
Okay, no, that's absolutely fine. No worries at all.
Panel.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry,
I understand.
Cheryl, if we let you in, no problem. We may have to let the rest of Hertfordshire in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's absolutely fine. Sorry to have caused a disruption. Okay, thank you. I'll see you later.
Okay. Are you okay? Sorry, thank you. Sorry, Kip, I've just seen it, but it's too late.
Oh, that was very amusing.
Right, where are we?
You've done 2 or 4. You've done 2.
It's a nice person to come in on our meeting. At least it wasn't a protester who got in. We didn't have to take them down. This has happened before. All right. Okay, Artemis, we've made our recommendations.
Yeah, back to Martinez.
I will forward to Fiona and to Joe, I believe. Where's Artemis gone?
Looking at him.
It's there.
Where? Oh, there. You've moved across the screen.
Yeah.
Artemis, can you guide us through, please?
If you're happy with the wording, what we will do is formalise it into a Word document so that you can all have another look at it. And we are going to do that for you tomorrow. I know that Joe Fisher, because of Ofsted, had to leave at 12:45. So Joe may still be on the call, but may have to send apologies. Apart from that, unless there are any further recommendations from the members, I don't have anything more to present to you. So
thank you. Thank you. Do we have any scrutiny recommendations from it? From this morning?
So at this point, I would say it's too early to have identified a strategic overarching scrutiny recommendation, but these recommendations will be scrutiny recommendations by you to the executive member. They will be ratified by the OSC on the 6th of February, and that's when they will formally become scrutiny recommendations.
Yeah, I'm at that. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. Any further questions or queries from us, from all of you?
Not this time, no.
No.
Content, yes. The sea is calm. For now. Sea never stays still. That's why I love it. It's always something happening with it. All right. Brilliant morning. A really good morning with all of you, and time spent with you and our officers. Well done, each and every one of you, and thank you so much. I'm going to close the meeting at 12:38. Can I do that?
Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. My pleasure. Look after yourselves. See you all soon. Thank you, Artemis, so much.